So welcome back. We are here with our second round of interventions that we have available, specifically looking at interventions with academics. As we know, and I've said before, that academics, behavior, course performance, all of them are kind of linked together, and attendance. But we have specific interventions that are in place for students that are struggling academically. And so our learning intention for today and with your team is to really understand the tiers of academic support and how we can link kids and monitor their progress within specific interventions. So we're looking at core one, or tier one, which is the core classroom instruction. Now, when we think about the core classroom instruction, this is what goes on typically, as I've said before, in the classroom. This is what teachers do when students aren't learning a specific concept. This is how they differentiate instruction. This is how they use formative assessments to guide further instruction. So this goes on normally. Now, we don't expect every student to get things right away or get concepts right away. So then we look at small group instruction with tier two, and it's targeted based on skill and what kids need. And then tier three, which is really intensive support for students that are severely deficient in certain skills, specifically within numeracy and literacy. And so this is our pyramid of supports that we have, of course, that you've seen over and over again. And as we resource map and you work with teams, we will definitely begin to add and take away certain interventions. But this is what we kind of look at, especially when you're looking at tier two and tier three. All right, so this half of the pyramid. And so we'll go over a few of these interventions and how we can tie everything together when it comes to attendance, behavior, and then course performance or academics. So we have specific classes, and if you were to pull up a student's schedule, you will see these support classes within some students' schedules. This is These are supports that are outside of the regular classroom setting that they're getting. For example, we have Read 180, and you might see it as reading improvement on a student schedule. And we typically looking at reading inventory scores. All students in English will take this test called the RI test, the reading inventory test, that gives a specific range that correlates to their reading level. And are they reading below grade level or basic, meaning they're severely below. So that test gives us a little bit of data, as well as looking at the SOL scores on previous tests. For example, a ninth grade students will look at their 8th grade SOL, reading SOL, and kind of triangulate that data, meaning that we're looking at not just the RI test, but the grades in their English classes as well as their SOL performance. And this is how we typically will place students in this reading improvement class. There's Voyager reading, and this is for students that are severely lacking in literacy. Read 180 is kind of, we like to think of it as a tier 2 support because they're not as far below as other students. But then there are some students that might be reading on a 5th grade level or 4th grade level, and so they would receive this Voyager reading support, which is more intensive and really hones in on specific literacy building strategies and skills. Voyager Math, of course, is another tier 3 support. Not a lot of students enrolled in this support, but it's nevertheless it's offered to and for students. And then, of course, we have a tier 2 support in our double block math. And you'll see that when you look at a kid's schedule, and you'll see math in the same block on 2 different days, and specifically Algebra 1 and Geometry. And when we look at double block math, this is more time in that specific math class. So teachers are able to really dig deep into the skills for kids to be successful. And so typically if a student is enrolled in double block math, once again, the same kind of criteria is used that's used when we're placing students in reading support classes. So if you see a kid and you're problem solving around a kid and you see they're in intervention support classes, a good place to start is, are they progressing in that intervention? And whether or not that intervention is being effective for that student. And that's the data that will be collected by the classroom teacher that's responsible for that support class. We also have Edgenuity, and I know we have seen and heard about Edgenuity. A lot of us have been trained on Edgenuity, and it's really the specific purposes for Edgenuity is one, on-time graduation, dropout prevention. You'll notice that a lot of students that are behind in their credits, that they're enrolled in the Edgenuity course, credit recovery. We also know that sometimes we might have to go back and recover either a single semester of a class that a student wasn't successful in or a full year. And typically the guidelines is 40% or higher in that class when they're placed for just credit recovery. As Edgenuity is also used for SOL remediation. Students can go on and receive SOL targeted instruction on Edgenuity. In some instances, and of course this is done in conjunction with school counseling department, that students will be enrolled for initial credit, but they have to be enrolled for initial credit with a content teacher. And then teachers teaching a specific class, for example, a chemistry class, and a child fails a quarter, a teacher can then go in and use Edgenuity for quarter-based recovery. So if it's second 9 weeks and that student has failed concepts in the first 9 weeks, the teacher can go in and enroll those students in Edgenuity for that one quarter and the specific contents that that student might need to be successful. And so these are options that the content area teachers can use. And I'm speaking in regards to English, Math, Science, and Social Studies for the quarter-based recovery piece. But Edgenuity serves many purposes. And we have our e-learning facilitator, Miss Gretchen Graham, also Miss Llewellyn, who is very, very knowledgeable about the purposes of Edgenuity and its uses. But you'll see that in a lot of students that are struggling their schedules. Tutoring and study hall, once again, all core content teachers will be required to post tutoring schedules and have the sessions available for students perhaps before or after school. And when we start linking kids to tutoring sessions, we might see kids that begin to slip and fall in classes because they're missing certain concepts or they've been absent. And so sometimes a good tutoring schedule and put that in your intervention plan will be an effective intervention or means to help that student get the skills and things that he needs before or after school. Also, SOL remediation. We like to think of this as another Tier 2 support. Students that need SOL, specifically for graduation, are required to attend a certain number of tutoring sessions or SOL remediation sessions prior to testing. They're not allowed to test unless they've received the remediation. Remediation can be face-to-face, or it can be online, like I said earlier, through the Edgenuity program and the tutor. However, all efforts have to kind of be logged into the RTI database. So when students are missing SOLs and the list goes out by the testing coordinator and school counselors about kids needing specific SOLs, it's very important to make sure that these students are attending these SOL remediation sessions so that they'll be able to retest and hopefully be successful with the testing. Now, recovery contracts and sessions is another intervention piece. Once again, a lot of these interventions are going to be driven through the content area teachers. So, a lot of different departments will choose to do recovery contracts. So, if a student fails first semester, there will be a specific contract that's put in place for that student to recover that first semester grade while still continuing on in class second semester. Once again, this year, our goal as a school and what we've been communicating with teachers is that when students start to fail, what can we do in the moment before it progressively gets worse? And so that's the purpose of having CLTs and the monitoring teams to look at students that are failing to make sure that we are catching them before it becomes a huge problem. Because if we wait to the end of the 9 weeks and the student has been missing days and missing assignments, it's going to be very hard for that student to get caught up and then continue on in class. So let's look at a sample recovery program contract. This is something that we've used in the past, and the student must attend a certain number of recovery sessions, and they must also earn a passing grade for second semester, pass SOL or second semester exam, and have appropriate behavior. And this is something that's signed by the parent, the guardian, and the student. And usually teachers will honor their grade change for first semester provided they meet the minimum requirements. But that's just one example of an intervention. Now, some departments have said that this is something that perhaps we'll use at the semester mark, and that's where we'll go back and look at kids that we might offer this recovery contract to. One tier 3 support is night school, Saturday school. I know we've heard about it, we've seen it several times throughout the last couple of years. Students that are attending night school. Once again, this is one of those supports that we use a blended model. Meaning that we use Edgenuity. Some students are working through courses on Edgenuity, and then some students are working with content area teachers to recover credits from prior courses. We'll have approximately 5 content teachers, 1 in each of the core, and then a PE or elective teacher. And we prioritize with seniors. Seniors are first. The off-track seniors are invited first, or are required to go first. And then we'll give preference or priority to juniors, sophomores, and then freshmen being at the very bottom of our priority list. But it's an intervention that can be used for any student. But once again, it's targeting our off-track seniors first. But we've been known to extend it to other classes as well. And so these are just a few of the interventions that we have to support our students academically. A lot of these interventions will be used in conjunction with perhaps support in behavior or attendance. And the next time that we'll come together in this sort of fair, as you have it, will be to look at student success plans and individualized learning plans with adult mentorship, that component. Because once we put a plan together for a student, then we're looking at all the interventions that we have and we think will be needed for this student, and we monitor that progress. So the next time you will get a group of students, you'll also receive some training on student success plans to go along with the interventions. So hopefully, if you have any questions, there's another wows, wonders, suggestions. Because once again, the interventions that we've outlined, they're not exhaustive. These are not the only things that we can do. This is just something that we've had in place for several years, and we have teachers and staff members that are very knowledgeable. So when we're looking at academics, a lot of this is driven through English, math, science, social studies, but it extends to the PE and elective teachers too. If you have any questions, let me know. Fill out your form as a team, and then talk a little bit about other supports or things that you might think are appropriate with looking at these interventions. Have a wonderful day.